We are live. Hello and welcome to Product Lessons, a podcast channel where we talk to product leaders from all over the world and learn from them how they build and manage world class software products. Before I introduce my guest today, I want to let you all know that this podcast is available in three channels: video on YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud. The links are mentioned below in the description. Also, if you like these conversations, do consider hitting subscribe. Hit me on Twitter as well. It's Product Lessons. I engage more there than any other social media platform. I'm thrilled to have with me a special guest today for the second time, Micah Dickerson. He's the head of product Bowery Valuation. Micah is an ex-colleague from Autodesk, and I think I told this in the first interview with him as well, that he is the reason why I got into product management, because I was so fascinated working with him, so influenced by his what he brought to work. In fact, Micah and I made a few customer visits together, and that's when I realized whatever this guy is doing, I want to do it. And then I just went up to him and I sought his help, and I told him that, Micah, I love what you're doing. I want to do the same. And he was so kind. He was my first mentor within the company, and he gave me some stretch assignments. Do you remember, Micah? We AutoCAD for Mac. I was doing some competitive references and stuff like that.
I do, yeah.
So, so I can't. I mean, I'm so grateful that his help initially in my formative years helped me get into product management. And yeah, today it's been close to 8 years into products, and we are talking again. So, Micah, welcome to Product Lessons. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Robbie. I'm great. It's great to see you.
So, Micah, you are with Bowery Valuation. It's been 6 months there already, and 6 months is a good enough time to reflect and see, okay, what worked, what did not work, how did you pace yourself into a new role. Um, so, before that, why don't you first tell us what is Bowery Valuation and what is your role there?
Sure. Yeah. Bowery is, we're in the commercial real estate valuation space. So we are basically a tech-enabled appraisal firm. We build our own technology to fuel the efficiency of our internal appraising team. We like to say it's smarter appraisal. And the current model that we're operating under is really just the beginning. We're going to be in several other business models soon as well, all related to appraisal. My role, though, is I'm head of product, and so I oversee a team of product managers that's growing very rapidly. I have 6 open heads right now. 2 new people start on Monday, and more to come. So it's a crazy time.
Nice. So when you say they are an appraisal firm, is it appraisal with like stamp duty and everything, or do they equip other appraisers? How is it?
We equip our own appraisers to create the appraisal report that's necessary as part of any real estate transaction. So we do focus on the commercial side, though, which is arguably quite a bit more complicated than what you would see for residential.
Got it. Yeah. I saw that from your website. And how's the team set up there? The product team. How big is the product team? And you said you are the head of the products. Are there multiple head of products for different product lines, or there is just one head of product?
No, we're still very much a startup. I mean, we did a round of a Series B round of funding back in July. Like, I think it closed the week before I started, and we were just over 100 people when I joined in July. And now we just hit like 200 already. So just since then, we're growing really rapidly. We're spinning the Series B. So when I joined the organization, we had 4 product managers. They all reported directly to me. I'm the only head of product. And we, growing the team will be up to, I think, 11 total on the product team. And hopefully in January, that'll all come to be.
So 11 product managers. So what kind of products then for these 11 product managers? So you said it's a small setup. 11 looks like you have a broader offerings of products. Maybe if you could talk about little bit of a setup on the products and the product managers.
Sure. So the product that the company has right now is the appraisal report. So it's actually a document that we send out when we're done with it. The app that we build to create those reports is sort of divided into sort of areas of focus, and there's sort of problem space kind of areas that then teams are assigned to. And there's like 1 PM per team. Some of the people that I'm hiring right now, though, are going to come in at more of a manager level, so they'll not be working directly with our development pods. They'll be sort of managing the PMs that are in those pods.
Got it. And as I said, it's been 6 months already. This question I always ask product leaders when they get into a new organization: how do they plan themselves for success for a new role, especially as head of product in a new organization? Um, so how do you plan? I've seen your career trajectory. You have moved across different industries. So when you are in a new company as head of product, what is your first, say, 30, 60, 90-day plan to make yourself effective?
I think for me, the first step is always assessment. Like I want to know what I'm walking into. I don't think that it's possible to effectively apply a one size fits all kind of template for product organizations. So you really have to walk in and understand what's working and what's not, who's there, what strengths do they have. If the organization's already great at agile development, I'm not going to spend much time on that, for example. If they're not, then maybe that is where I'll spend some time. What does it mean to be a product owner? Like all that kind of stuff, right? I spend a lot of time assessing the team that I work with, the people. It's really my focus. I want to understand where their strengths are and where they're not, and what skills or expertise are we lacking on the team? What do we have to go find ways to fill in the gaps, right? Maybe that's hiring, maybe that's training, whatever. And then we really want to play to the strengths that we have, and fill in the gaps for the stuff we don't. And I do the same thing kind of around process. What's working? What are people complaining about? What's not working? What does the output look like? Are we actually delivering on a regular, frequent basis? Where are the hangups? I really focus on the operation first, because without the machine running, it doesn't matter if your strategy is great if there's no machine to feed it into, right? So this is the first thing I always focus on, is like, is this team operating, right? Then I can shift my focus a little bit. But like, I really look at where I can make kind of the highest impact changes first. And I think in some cases that's as simple as putting in place an operational cadence that encourages cross-functional communication, so people just know what's happening. Like, it's amazing how when communication's there, so much of the stress just evaporates all by itself. In other cases, it can be more complicated or nuanced. In every case, I think I look at how is communication happening or not. How is the team organizing its information? I think at Autodesk we use Confluence quite a bit. Like, it's still one of my favorite tools. Or in Jira, or in whatever places information live. Like, how is that all being organized? And is the team really delivering? And if they're not, then figuring out why. But that's all in service of getting the machine running, so that when it comes time and we have a cool strategy to feed into it, then I have a way to execute on strategy, right? But if the machine is already running, like when I walk into an organization, and there have been times when that's been the case, or at least running pretty well, I can go straight to strategy. And the way I approach that is sort of similarly. Like, I kind of assess what's there already, and I map out. Literally, I draw a map. Now these days it's not on paper, but there's like magical online tools like Miro that I can use for that. But I actually draw a picture of everything that I hear from the leadership, from the people on my team, from the cross-functional colleagues and everything. And I try to piece it all together. I draw lines between things, and I try to understand what I'm hearing and how it all connects. And that lets me see the logic and the thinking there, or the lack thereof, right? Like, so in some cases it's made perfect sense, in others it hasn't. And that map helps me see where I need to focus, and where the lines aren't connected that need to be, So I literally draw a map. And sometimes I do like workshops, like cross-functionally or with the teams, to kind of tease out more about how people are thinking about what they're there to do. And then I can put that in my map too, so I really focus on getting as fully developed a map as possible, because that helps me most accurately see where I need to give the most attention first. And I think, for the ways that are working, I always want to find ways to amplify those. And for things that don't make sense, then I can start drawing my own pictures of what I think it should be. Right. So if there's this like cluster of something that doesn't make sense, I'll kind of pull that part out and I'll draw it the way I think it should be. And then I think the most important part that I do after that is, or as I'm doing that really, is I'm shopping that around with other people like who know more about the organization than I do. And I say, hey, if we drew it this way, would that make sense? And if it doesn't, then why not? You know, or what about this do you like? What doesn't make sense, right? Because you know, if I'm joining a new company, I don't know anything about the company. I don't know anything about their business. You know, I'm starting from zero, and there are a lot of people around me who know a lot about it. So you know, I really like to tap the experts when I can, and sometimes I get feedback that really shifts my thinking, or it corrects what I've maybe misunderstood too, or it might validate what I think is the right way to go. So anyway, I advocate for a lot of like cross communication because it's in the conversations that the magic happens. So anyway, I think that whole process just kind of orients me to the work that's already in progress. And in doing that, I start to see where additional opportunities are. So, but it's a lengthy assessment process. And then, you know, I start to layer in the changes that I can make, you know, and the way that I can influence the organization, that sort of thing over time. So I don't have like I think like the whole 30, 60, 90 thing. My process is maybe a little less structured than that. It's definitely the first 30 days I'm in assessment mode. I'm observing. And then after that, it's like time for implementation and to get things running. And then I start to set some goals and start to measure against those.
Right. Let's double tap on that, especially on the idea when you are moving into a new industry or a new sector altogether. How do you build influence when you do not know much about the industry? Because we talked about product strategy, and a lot of it depends upon how well you know your customers and your industry. And I know for sure, Micah, you are one of the best influences to me in customer centricity. I knew how many customer visits you made when you were at Autodesk. So my question is, how do you build influence? How do you make decisions in your first 90 days when you know the rest of the organization knows more about the customers and the industry more than you? So how do you navigate that phase of, say, the first a quarter or so where you do not have the wherewithals to make effective product strategy decisions? So how do you transition to that phase?
I mean, that is the classic PM dilemma, right? Like when you are moving around from industry to industry, like you never really know, right? And you know, some companies really look for subject matter expertise when they're hiring PMs, and you know, frequently you have to trade that off for product management expertise. Sometimes you get really lucky and you find somebody who has both, and then that's like that's a big deal. That's an amazing deal, right? But most of the time, it's one or the other. And you know, in my case, every time I've switched companies, I've switched industries. I've worked in small business marketing tools. I went to I worked in marketing research. I worked in you know, architecture and engineering alongside you. Then I went to healthcare. Then I went to commercial real estate from the leasing side, and now I'm on commercial real estate and the appraisal side. Like, so it's like huge context switches each time I've changed jobs. So, I mean, my answer to the question is relatively simple. I ask around, I ask for help. You know, I don't know everything, but the people who I'm working with frequently know. Well, if they don't know everything, they might know a whole lot of stuff, right? So, right now, I work in an industry that's widely regarded as being extremely complicated. There's lots of reasons for that, but it is an extremely complicated space that has not been standardized by technology yet. And I will never, ever know this stuff the way the veterans at the company do. I won't. I mean, a lot of these people have been doing this their whole life. There's no way I'm ever going to have that body of knowledge. These people are experts. I am not. I build relationships, though, so I have people to ask questions about. I also lead with my strengths. My strengths are not in the industry of you know, whatever industry my product is serving. Usually, my strengths are different, right? I don't know appraising in this case, but I do know product, and I know how to break options down in order to determine what's most important. Sometimes it's simple math that has nothing to do with the industry. I worked for a company a while ago where it was really common for salespeople to contact me directly about things they wanted to see in the product, and I was really overwhelmed at first. Dealt
We'll
with
come to that. That is my favorite topic,
right, yeah.
sales
I mean,
relationship.
many of us, right? And I mean, I was overwhelmed, and but then I figured out that if I could determine how much something would cost to build, something they were asking for, like in dollars, I could talk about ROI more directly with them, which I found was a much more common language than my product speak that I was using before, right? One time I got a call about doing something that would have cost well over $500,000 to build. A very expensive request, right? I did some homework and I realized that our best possible outcome, if we built that thing, is that we could get 3 or 4 new customers with it. At that company, our lifetime value for a customer was around $16,000 over 6 years. So, best case scenario, we get $64,000 over 6 years for a $500,000 investment. Would you invest in that? I mean, once I laid out the math, like I suddenly had the respect of the team. They were like, "Oh, that's how this works." Like sometimes it's not like, it's just that sometimes the product process is sort of opaque to a lot of to people who don't do it, and they don't necessarily understand like how we work. And it's not because they're incapable of understanding, it's because we usually don't tell them how we work. And when they don't know that, then anything's an option, right? So in that case, when I was able to share that kind of thinking in that language, it had the added benefit that the team then started thinking a little bit more critically about their requests and started doing that math themselves. It wasn't complicated math. I told them some of the basic, factors of like what things cost, right? And it was a great filter for the requests that came in after that. And then we were having better conversations, right? And then the things they did ask for were maybe more worth considering, right? Because now we were on more levels of field there. So anyway, I think like in terms of not being an expert in the industry, I don't see that as a major handicap. I talk about things in terms of what I know, and I try to line that up with what the other parties know, and then then I think that's when the magic can happen. So
Got it.
I also ask for a
So
lot of patience as I get to know things. Right, I ask a lot of dumb
right.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So what you're saying is there's no need to feel insecure when you're landing in an organization as a head of product and take this additional pressure that, oh, I am the head of product, I should know everything. But what you're saying is no, you should be open to seeking help from as many people, as many experts within the
Yeah.
organization, and only that's and building relationships and taking them as your partners, as your ally in helping you
Hell yeah.
ramp up your helping you ramp up your own learning, isn't it? Um, okay, then how do you make your strategy? Because your strategy again depends upon that. So do they become all collaborators in coming up with a product strategy on how do you want to shape up your vision of your product, say in the next 12 months or so?
So in terms of like vision and strategy, I think the first thing when I'm going into a new organization, and I've done this a few times now, I gotta recognize that there was a world there before me, right? This company was running and well enough to be able to hire me, right? So they were doing something right? So I have to recognize that that world existed before I got there, and when I walk in, it's still there, right? There may or may not have already been a clear vision in place for the product or products that I'm taking over. It really varies by the type of organization. I think like a mission-led company is probably going to have a pretty tight vision that everybody understands, right? If every morning you get up to save the children, like that's what it is, right? However, if the organization is more sales-led, at least in my experience, that means probably a little less attention has been given to that kind of visionary, vision-led kind of thinking. The first thing I do is I talk to people, a lot of people, to assess like what I'm working with. The same as like walking into the very first day, assessing my team and the processes and stuff. Like I want to understand like what's already in place, like for strategy, for vision. And if there's already a great vision in place that everyone understands and is totally behind and it makes sense, then why reinvent the wheel? I'm not going to touch that, right? Like I'll just run with that. Great. That's easy. Now I get to go to step 2. Perfect. If it's not good or it's not well communicated or entirely absent, then the story is going to be a little bit different. And I think it's rare that there's nothing there at all, or it's very unlikely the company would have been even moderately successful. But I have worked in places where that was the case. Usually it's more like, the vision needs help or it's not been well communicated.
Right.
And those are totally different things that require totally different approaches to addressing. If it needs help, I start asking a lot of questions, and I will I try to poke holes in it and see kind of where the thinking is. Right. I think the hard part is when the organization is married to it, even if it's not great. And that can be really challenging, and it requires a much more delicate approach. I think really focusing on understanding why what's there was put in place to begin with is a really good strategy for kind of unpacking this. And then very often the original thinking is very good, and sometimes the words just kind of get mixed up. I found that to be true a lot of times. And if you can get to what the original thinking was, maybe there's a better way to just say it, right? Sometimes it's that easy from a vision perspective anyway. So I don't know. I focus on what the world would look like if we were successful, and that's generally kind of the framework I use for kind of working from a vision perspective. I also think that there are times when it's all greenfield and you can kind of do anything. You're starting a new company or something or even just a new product line within a company. You don't have all the baggage of an in progress company. It's a little bit easier to kind of say, this is how things are, and here's the motivating thing that we're here to do. And I think alignment with an existing vision takes a lot of understanding too. You have to really understand the intent there, and then you have to use it. There's a lot to be said for repetition. If there's some certain words that people really respond to, if you put the vision statement in every presentation you make, stuff like that, so it's in front of people all the time. But all that leads to kind of the the strategy and the roadmap. And I think I guess I'll talk about strategy in terms of roadmap, if that makes sense. So how I get to the roadmap is the strategy, I guess. So that's I guess what I mean. I kind of hate roadmaps. I kind of really hate roadmaps, but you need to have some idea of what the plan looks like over time, right? I think there are a couple of things here. One is how to formulate the plan, which is the strategy part, right? And then there's how to communicate the plan, which is a separate aspect and requires a whole different set of thought. I think over the years, I've seen lots of ways of doing roadmaps. The less strategic ones are often dictated by an executive. Sometimes they're derived from a list of things sales wants. Sometimes it's based on votes for feature requests. I think I've seen sometimes they just seem to have been pulled out of thin air. My favorite way to think about roadmaps is something I sort of am a little bit embarrassed to say I only learned about much later in my career, which is a system called jobs to be done, which I think is pretty popular these days. A lot of people probably know about this. But so basically what we do is we identify the job the product is intended to serve for the user. We break that job down into steps, and then we identify which outcomes are present or desired at each step in that process. Then through some analysis, we do some surveying, we do a lot of talking to people, et cetera. We can see which outcomes are the best opportunities for the company. We're looking for things that have a high importance rating, like this thing is really important to me, like I really need this, and a low satisfaction rating. So there is not currently an option in the market that meets this need. So high importance, low satisfaction. The biggest delta between those things is your best opportunity. Underserved, important needs, right? So depending on how you measure that, you can actually stack rank your opportunities and work on them in order from best to worst. and you actually get opportunity scores if you use this magic formula that Tony Ulwick came up with. And actually, I've worked with statisticians that have other ways of doing it that might even be better. And voila, you have a roadmap, right? And it's strategic because you're saying my strategy is that I'm going to go to the most underserved, highest important opportunities first, and then work my way down the list. So I really like that way of addressing that. I think that method works best when you're starting out with a new product or a new user type, or just looking for a high level reset of the overall plan. In most cases, I like to use data to inform my roadmap, and quite frequently the strategy as well. Like I think segmenting the audience is a great approach. For example, so like, which part of the universe of users do I want more of, right? How many of those are there? And then what do they need in order to buy my products? Like, and then for me to get this many more, what do I have to do to the product to get this additional portion of that universe, and so on and so forth. It's just another approach to doing that, but it can be very data driven. In one case, this is one of my favorite stories. My team did a study to see if usage patterns of our product correlated in any way with longevity as a customer. In other words, if users touched certain features, did they stay longer as customers? Like, did they find a special value in these areas, right? Turned out they did. There were two areas of the product that were highly correlated with longevity. And if we could get folks to touch one of these two features at least twice, we would see this additional benefit of longevity. They'd stay another like 2 years or something. For us, that was a big deal. It was a huge jump in revenue. So I think from a strategic perspective, we worked on driving adoption of those two things first, because we knew those were going to be the things that had the most impact on people staying longer, right? We weren't having any trouble selling the product at that time. It was more about getting them to stay longer and to get more value out of each customer. So we just adjusted, that way. So I think, from a roadmap perspective, there are lots of ways to do them, and there should be, because there are lots of reasons to do them, lots of different reasons. And I think but the main thing that needs to be considered from the communication perspective is, who am I communicating to, and what's the need here, right? Like, I've been asked to do roadmaps for specific clients, where we go and we say, these are the things we're working on for the next year, in like the enterprise space. Like, that's terrifying, right? Because it's like, I don't know if I can commit to all these things 100%, but that's what they're asking for. So some people talk about outcomes on roadmaps, and I think this plays into that whole audience question. It's like, when I'm talking about my roadmap with my product people, and maybe even internal to the company, I can talk about outcomes I want to plan for. It's a lot harder to take that language outside the company. When I have to talk to a client, they're like, yeah, stop with all the product speak. Like, I want to know what you're building for me, right? So it can be really delicate, and you really have to think about who the audience is and what they need to hear in order to get what they need out of it. So anyway, I think whenever possible, my strategy, and therefore my roadmap, is based on data. I think strategy should have targets, and everything on the roadmap should line up with those. And everybody who's working on everything on the roadmap should understand exactly how what they're working on lines up to all those goals. So that builds alignment, and then that makes it possible to track your progress toward the goals. So
yeah. So you
somebody, I've been talking.
Sorry, no, you made sense. You mentioned about stack ranking your opportunities with the opportunity and how much of it is underserved. In fact, I interviewed Tony Ulwick on my podcast a while ago. I'm a big fan of Jobs to be Done. His model of Jobs to be Done have different models. Tony Ulwick's model helps me prioritize. So that is, I have always found it useful. My question to you is, how long do you prepare your roadmap for? Like, do you come up with an annual roadmap? Because I also, over the years, have never trusted my own roadmap, no matter how great the planning is, because eventually when the rubber meets the road, when the teams start building these features, you never stick on the timeline that you that we had
Mhm.
planned it at the outset, right?
Right.
So sometimes I question myself, what's the point of it at all if we are not sticking to these timelines?
Yeah.
So now I have a different approach to things. I do not ever commit to timelines. I said these are the things that we are working on now. These are the things we are going to be working on the next 3 months, and then these are the things that we hope to build in the long term. So maybe what has been your approach in sharing these roadmap commitments to stakeholders?
Again, I'll say I think it depends on who I'm talking to. You know, the higher the risk, the less detail. So like I never want to talk beyond 6 months, because I mean, if I'm talking beyond 6 months, I don't know what I'm talking about, even if I'm sounding really confident about it, because a lot can change in 6 months, and as you're getting through these 6 months, you're learning things that are fundamentally going to change the next 6 months. So
Right.
now, thematically, I don't have any problem with that. Like, hey, we want to address this problem area in the second half of next year. I have no problem with that. Sure. But then, when you start talking about, well, what are you going to do that? I can't tell you yet. Right. I can talk in pretty specific detail about the next 3 months usually. The 3 months following that, it gets a little fuzzier. We're talking more maybe epic level kind of stuff that we're thinking about.
Right.
And then beyond that, it's the later category, right? So it's the same thing that you said. It's now, next, later. I think that's a really great framework, because as long as we have a general sense of what those timeframes are and everyone kind of generally adheres to those, then you have a pretty decent thing that you can kind of compare across products or roadmaps or whatever.
Right.
So that's the challenge, though, is if you have multiple teams using the now, next, later framework, and one person thinks of now as like literally today, and another person thinks of now as like the next month or two, then you've got different levels of detail and they don't line up, and later means something different and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's something to just watch for. We're actually doing that on my team right now. We're kind of calibrating what we mean by now, next, and later, so that we can all kind of talk in the same level of detail about the things that are going to get work done.
Got it. My next question is the difference between a sales-driven organization and a product-driven organization.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, I've worked in very aggressive sales-driven organization, who I admire sales because they spend all their time with the customers. They have a
Mm-hmm.
sense of what the customers need, and sometimes I struggle to bring value in terms of, okay, if sales knows about their customers, they know what the customers want. What am I doing? And I just so they also have this sense, especially if you are new to the organization. So they would give a sense of a list of their wish list, which they are cocksure of, knowing that this is going to drive value and revenues, and all they expect from the product team is to deliver them on time.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the delivery mindset. So have you been in such a scenario?
Oh yeah.
Um, I spoke to Marty Kagan. I mean, two episodes before you, Marty Kagan was here, and he completely said that, you are giving me very good example of sales-driven organization, and this is set to fail. How do you navigate this, and what are your thoughts around this?
So I think sales organizations typically think in terms of solutions. They're not thinking in terms of outcomes and problems to be solved. As a result, the requests become very focused in on features and on updates to existing features and that kind of thing. Oftentimes, what they're hearing from the customers they're working with, the prospects they're working with, are things that the customers or prospects have heard out in the market, which is typically very feature driven. I'll give you an example. I worked in a place, we were working on software that helped patients communicate with healthcare practices. And I was hearing from sales, we need a patient portal. We need a patient portal, something a
Yeah,
patient can log into, right?
this is how
And
the conversation starts. We need this.
yeah, we need this. If we had this, we could sell 20% more units, right?
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, let's dig into this. And honestly, at first I was like, yeah, it sounds good to me. I like patient portals. Let's build one. Right. And then, somebody tapped me on the shoulder and they were like, that doesn't seem very, that seems a little bit solution, led. And I was like, okay, good point. Let's take a step back and let's look at this. What's a patient portal? So I call them back and I was like, tell me, okay, thanks for calling. What's a patient portal? And they go, oh, a thing where a patient can log in and like check their balance and like send the doctor a message and like schedule an appointment and all that. And I was like, are you sure that's what they're talking about? Like, well, yeah. And then I talked to someone else and I said, well, what's a patient portal? And they're like, place to pay bills. And I was like, okay. And I asked somebody else, what's a patient portal? Turns out patient portal was 45 different things, right? But they were calling it a patient portal. So if I just started working on a patient portal, how much of that would I have gotten right? Probably none of it. Here's the other thing. When we got down to it, the thing that was really, really important to folks was that there was a way to pay bills online, for patients to pay their bills online. And we already had that. And they didn't know that. So we had a different problem. We had a communication problem that they just didn't know we already did that. And they were calling it a patient portal. So if we just gone down the path of building exactly what we were asked to build, we would have spent a lot of time on something that wasn't necessary. It turns out we ended up investing in this completely different thing that this PM that was on my team was this brilliant guy, and he was very observant. And we used to go into practice all the time, and he noticed this problem happening every single time he'd go into these practices. And nobody was talking about that in the market because nobody had built a solution for that problem yet. We built that thing. We built a solution to solve that problem. That's what we became known for. That's what set us apart in the market. And that's what kept us afloat for a couple of years while we figured out what else we wanted to do. And it was really, really interesting because then we started to see copycats and we were like, oh crap, now we're the thing people are asking for on the other end of the other phones, in their competitors' phone banks. And that's how innovation happens, right? And if you're building the things that they're asking for specifically, you're definitely not innovating, because those are things somebody thought of a few years ago, built, and are now in the market already. So it takes you a year to build that stuff. Now you're another year behind. They're already 3 years ahead of you to begin with. This is not a recipe for success. That's why living in the problem space is so much more important. So whenever I worked with the sales team, I've tried to challenge them to say, I hear you asking for this feature. What problem is this trying to solve? What is the problem that the end user is having that this thing is meant to solve? And sometimes it's really hard to identify if that's not where your head already is, But I think, though, the most important thing in working with anybody, sales included, is empathy. Like I try to understand what it's like to be them, right? Like, what's it like to be in their shoes? What's important to them? If they're on the phone hour after hour trying to sell this thing that they can't sell, and they keep realizing that it's this one common thing, or so it seems, that is keeping them from making the sales, like, that's going to be really frustrating, right? And so I try to dig in. I try to understand what it is that is frustrating them, and what we can do to solve for that. And so, in this feature that we developed, that was kind of this brand new innovative thing that was solving a problem that for some reason nobody had tried to solve before. What we did is we gave the salespeople not the feature they were asking for, but we gave them a way to change the conversation. When those requests came up on the phone, they'd be like, yeah, we don't do that. Sorry. But what we do is this amazing thing that nobody else does. And this thing's actually going to save you money or make you money, right? And that helped them change the narrative, and that it changed the whole game. Like, the sales team felt very differently about how we worked after that. Right. So I don't know, but I think empathy is a big deal. And I mentioned that simple math I did to demonstrate ROI. Because when I put it in those terms, the team totally got it. In other cases, I've used a different approach, and I've identified trade-offs, right? So you're asking for X, Y, and Z from me right now. I can only do one of those. Okay, so I agree they're all important. I have no problem with that. So which one do I do? You tell me, which one do I do? Because I can't do all three. And I've gotten responses like, "What? Well, I didn't realize you could only do one." I'm like, yeah. I mean, it's the same people who are going to do all three things, so you get one. And sometimes the forced trade-off, I mean, that's not entirely true in product land, but when you make it that black and white and help people understand that if we do this, we cannot do this,
Right.
sometimes that helps them see like kind of what's involved. And I also like to invite them into our rituals sometimes, just so they can kind of see behind the curtain and see how the sausage is made, and I think of, this isn't specifically with the sales team, but I did an exercise once at Autodesk University in Las Vegas, where I invited a bunch of AutoCAD for Mac users into a conference room, and I asked them to write down on little sticky notes every single thing that they wanted the product to do that it didn't do. And at first, you could see like the scowls on their face, and they're like writing furiously, and 1,000 at least like sticky notes were on the table. And then I asked them to put them up on the wall, and we grouped them into categories. And then I said, okay, can you help me prioritize these groups? And I got the whole group somehow to agree on, this is priority 1 category, priority 2 category, priority 3 category, whatever. And very quickly what they saw was, 1, holy crap, that's a lot of requests on the wall, right? Didn't realize there were that many things. And that was just the people in that room, right? It wasn't all the things we had on the list. They also saw that the things that they thought were such great ideas that they really, really wanted were actually the things that ended up in the last category, in the very last priority, because all these other things were so much more critical to do first. And it gave them some understanding of like, oh, that's how it works. I get it now. You have to make trade-off decisions. It's not a complicated concept, but like, if you're not thinking about it like that already, you're not thinking about it that way, right? So anyway, it was an amazing exercise. And afterward, I had almost everybody in that room come up to me and say, "This is the most interesting thing I've ever done at AU." and they had a little bit of understanding of like how the process works, and what we go through, and they had a little bit of empathy for us, even maybe.
Right. Yeah, that is so true, and that's why I invite sales team for sprint reviews on exactly the kind of trade-off decisions we take, just so that they know the constrained environments we work at daily. So yeah, it has helped to have empathy either side. My question to you is, how do you, as a head of product, you are also, I know, Micah, you have this natural flair of building relationship, and you are a good people person. However, it is not sufficient, because you have to say no to people and then you piss them off, right? How do you say, especially when there is a big sales team and each of them have their priorities, but you are not able to deliver to their wish lists? How do you take the pressure to say no to them on their face, and still retain that healthy relationships with everybody?
I think the most important thing is that they have as much information as possible. And if they can see where the trade-offs are, then the no isn't as hard. Like they kind of can see it's going to be a no, right? The same thing happened like in this example I was saying about when I was able to identify the cost of this thing being $500,000 just to build it versus the maximum return that we could get would be $34,000. I'm like, would you make that investment? Like that isn't a product thing. That's just a logic thing. Like it doesn't make any sense, right? And so if I can put things in those terms where it's so obvious that like, this thing makes sense and this one makes less sense, and sometimes the differences aren't quite that dramatic, right? But if you can get it into terms that demonstrate the differences and why one is of a higher value than another, then it makes it a little bit easier. Saying no is never easy, but if people understand why you're saying no, and how you got to know, I think that's the most important part. It can't be arbitrary. I mean, you can't just be like, I don't know, like, cause I said so. Like you can't do that. Right. And especially if it's the salespeople are making the money for the company, right? Like, I mean, what they do is very important and we need to support them. So like it's especially hard to say no there when you know that it could be a revenue opportunity. But if you can say there's a better revenue opportunity if I put all my forces on this instead, that's the part that you need to know. I think sometimes the challenge is that different salespeople are working on different aspects of business.
Yes.
And they aren't thinking necessarily about the good of the company. They're thinking about the good of their wallet or their small team.
Right? Their immediate returns, preserving their current accounts. So they do not have, their incentives are very different than what the product incentives are. So we have to have a much more balanced approach, whereas they are trying to look at the next quarter returns and something of that sort.
Yeah. I mean,
So
there's all
okay,
sorts of things you can do there, right? Like, I mean, there are ways that you can reserve a small amount of time in each sprint to do like kind of small requests that come in from channels like that.
right.
You can sort of round robin those types of things. Like you say, okay, hey, look, Mr. X team over here, I'm going to work on Y team stuff this time, and next time I'm going to work on your thing. So there are
Mhm.
ways that you can kind of,
Yeah.
balance it, even when you have to say no sometimes. Like, I get it, you're next in line. Sometimes,
Exactly.
you
So
know,
this is the kind of conversations we are having now. So we come up with quarterly plan, the team plans, the product team
mm,
plans a quarter, but that does not mean that we are blocked with this piece of work, with this amount of work for that quarter. We keep a 10% buffer for all these small feature requests that could be high on priority, but we can still push it onto the teams. So yeah,
mhm.
so there is a trade-off there. My next question is, you said you have around 11 product managers. How many teams are we talking about for 11 product managers? I'm trying to see the ratio between the PMs and the teams, development teams.
So we do 1 p.m. Well, in theory, we do 1 p.m. per pod. And then a pod is a standard sort of agile scrum kind of pod size. So you have like 4 or 5 engineers, you have an engineering lead, QA, and a designer that are usually tied into a pod, something like that.
So 11 pods for 11 PMs. Is that how it is?
Yeah, that's where we will get. Well, it's not exactly, because a couple of those people in my team are actually managers, so they're not
I
working
see.
directly with pods. So yeah, I mean, we're
Right.
aiming for 6 pods here in the next couple of months, and then we'll. Oop, did we lose Ravi? I think we lost our host. Well, anyway, yeah, we're aiming for 6 pods, and then we'll grow from there. Hopefully, we'll be able to significantly grow next year as well.
Sorry, I lost you. I lost you for a bit, but you're
No
back now.
worries. I just kept talking.
So you said you have 6 pods now, and you're hoping to grow that, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll have a sixth very soon, and then I mean, we're hoping in the next year that we'll significantly grow the team from
And
there.
each of these pods are building user-facing products, or there are platform and internal teams as well.
There are platform teams as well. Yeah.
Okay.
We just sort of started thinking of them that way, so we're still kind of getting used to what that means,
Right.
and determining kind of the right relationships between the other kind of pods.
Right.
Um, but yeah. But we're hoping to significantly grow the number of pods so that we can have parallel development in lots of different areas at the same time. And right now we've got kind of 5 work streams, and we're hoping to have quite a bit more so that we can make progress across more stuff at the same time.
Got it. And the products are all digital products, or they are also API products that integrate, because I think you work with banks and realtors, right? So do they also integrate your products are APIs that integrate in your customers' world, or you sell them off the shelf products? How is it?
Yeah, not yet. I mean, the only people who are using our technology right now are our internal appraisers. Like, that's not going to be the long game, but like that's how it works right now.
Okay.
So we are not doing any sort of integration where we are sending some reports via XML
Right.
to certain clients who request it that way. I think in the next year, we're going to spend a lot more time focused on the client experience, and then
Got
we'll probably start talking a lot more about APIs and customer portals and broader facing applications that have a more diverse set of users than what we have right now.
Got it. Let's talk about planning to build a big feature. One of the challenges that I have seen is, before I joined an organization, is to blow up the scope of a feature and work on it for, say, 2 quarters and then ship it, which is again a very traditional way of building products.
Mhm.
Have you what kind of models that you use to have a more leaner approach and not overspend on a lot of upfront investment into a product?
Yeah. I am well, there's several things. I'll say one of the processes I'm a big fan of is the design sprint. And I mean that with a capital D and a capital S. It's the 5-day process that was basically illustrated in this book called Sprint by these two guys from Google Ventures.
Yeah.
It's basically, it takes you from almost nothing on day one to a tested prototype on day 5. And so in a 5-day process, you kind of thoroughly interrogate the issue. You come up with a whole bunch of different possibilities for how to solve the problem. And then you actually build a prototype in some form or fashion. Sometimes it's just smoke and mirrors. Sometimes it's actually working code, depending on what you're doing. And then on Friday, you're actually testing the thing with actual users. And I've done a bunch of those, and they are spectacular. Like, it's just so amazing what you can get done in a week if you focus. And it's only 5 days. So if you get to the end of the week and it completely blows up and it was a complete waste of time, one, it wasn't, because you have learned a lot in the process. You also came up with 25 other ideas for how to solve the problem. So just the thing you tried is the one that didn't work, right? So maybe you can try another one. You can start on day 4, the next time if you want. And you also know what not to build, right? And you didn't waste 6 months doing it. 5 days, who cares, right? Start over. That's a really good investment of time. Frequently though, you find out, wow, we're onto something. And then you've just like leapfrogged the whole, it's like a huge step forward. Now we know, wow, this thing is validated. This thing has legs. So I think that's one thing. The other thing is it's so important to focus on small slices of the big picture, where you don't wait until the whole thing's done to ship the whole thing. Because in the meantime, nobody gets any value out of it, right? And along the way, the rules are changing. Like, the market is changing, your customer is changing, your customer might even go out of business. I mean, who knows, right? Like, lots of things are changing along the way. So the more you can get out in like small slices that deliver incremental value, the less risk you introduce to the project. And I've been in situations where there's been a lot of risk and we really messed up, and then what do? You can't go back in time and fix it, right? I don't know if you remember when we were working on AutoCAD for Mac, we started doing multiple alpha releases before we did the major release. And that was kind of a very different thing for AutoCAD. Like, they hadn't really ever done that before. But what we did in the very first one is we put a very lightweight version of this feature that we thought we were going to build in it. And we put it in front of one of our kind of famous beta testers. I believe his name was Chris. And Chris immediately was like, no, not this at all. This is completely wrong. No. And we went, oh, I'm so glad we only spent a few days on this, because if we had just shipped this, it would have been a whole year before we could fix it. Because back then, we were doing annual releases still. And like, that would have been horrible, but we were able to catch it in early alpha. We reworked it, put it in the next alpha. He said, perfect, put it in the box and shipped it. And it was amazing. Right. Like, so that it was the small slice methodology, right? That really, I shouldn't call it methodology, but like the small slice thinking that really helped us avoid that risk. Like, what a terrible mistake that would have been, right? So yeah, I think thinking small slices. I did a class once called Elephant Carpaccio. Like, it's kind of gross to think about, but like a giant animal like into thin slices, right? Like, how do you do that? And it was really fascinating. But anyway, it's about risk mitigation. So that's what I do.
MVPs. So my next question is on. So you talked about what was the patient portal, right? So if a request like that comes in and you have that on your roadmap, how do you spend your energies? Like, how do you delegate it to your product managers? Do they have time to do some discovery and research before they jump onto the solution? And how do you delegate that to your product team? Like, I just want to know how do you organize your product teams into these roadmap initiatives?
So discovery and research are two words that I think get kind of used too much. Like, I think the definition of both of those have been muddied a little bit over the years. When I think of discovery, I'm thinking about finding problems to solve in the market. And so like, I think that's something that PM should be doing all the time. That's one of the reasons, like when we were at Autodesk, why I saw customers all the time, because I was looking for opportunities to help them. right? So
Yeah.
that often like turned into, or I should say, that looked like I would just sit in their office and watch them work, which is a little bit creepy, but also really informative. And frequently asked a bunch of questions and stuff too to kind of clarify what I was seeing, whatever. And you start to notice patterns. And this is like what I was saying about that PM that was on my team at that other company, who just noticed this problem that happened every time. And he was like, "Is this a problem?" And then we tested it, and sure enough, it was. And then we built this feature that, like I said, ended up differentiating us. It was like the most innovative thing the industry had seen in a long time. So, yes, I think PMs need to be doing that kind of discovery all the time. Because PMs,
Right.
the way I think about PMs and our role is we are investors. That's our role in this product development process. We decide where the company puts its time and energy and its money, really, in terms of development. And then we have a great team of partners in UX and engineering to help us figure out what the right solution to those problems is, or are. But anyway, it's not our job to do all that by ourselves, right? And we should be
Right.
involved in all of that, but we aren't leading the solution part of that. So when we get to solution discovery, and we're not talking about which problem we should solve anymore, but instead how we should solve it, I really like to let UX lead there. I mean, that's what they're trained to do. They come up with the right way to solve the problem so that the need gets met. And I want to watch, right? I want to be like, oh, wait, I think I might have misspoken and I didn't quite describe the problem the right way, because what you're coming up with as a solution is going to probably solve this other problem or something. So I want to be able to course correct, but I'm not,
Right.
my hands are very rarely in the solution. And I mean, my hands as product's hands, and, my team's hands, really. That's how I think it should be done anyway.
Right.
But yeah, you have to make room for that
Right.
initial problem discovery, and then you got to let go of the reins a little bit when it comes time for solutions, I think.
Got it. Let's talk about decision making as a product leader, as a head of product. Sometimes there's way too much pressure because you need to take decisions, the final call. And how do you do that? How do you take the pressure, which especially if that decision has multiple consequences, sometimes very, very big consequences, because you never know if something would blow up on a bad decision, but nobody else, because eventually it has come to you and there is no buck to be passed. So how do you take that pressure, and do you have any guidelines or principles or rules of thumb to make a decision that nobody else is taking and you have to take it finally?
Very, very carefully is my answer. No. I think there is always a need to, I guess I want to say, like, to do the homework to make sure you understand what the decision is and what the impact could actually be. All the angles from all the different stakeholders, all the functional groups, like whoever needs to be involved and know what's going on. I think they need to be involved at some level in at least informing the decision, whether or not it's their responsibility to make the decision or not. It's important that the decision maker understands those perspectives, so that they make a well-informed decision. It's not, I don't think it's very rare that a really important decision is going to have to just be made on the spot without giving, any thought, right? And if that's the case, then, it doesn't matter who makes the decision, right? If it's just like you go with your gut, like hopefully you know the thing well enough that you have a good instinct. But I think my approach, whenever possible, is to get as much information as I can in the time I have to make the decision, so that I understand all the different angles. And I think that's sort of the hallmark of the way I work, is I get lots of input from other people, so that if I miss something, I now have access to it. And I also understand if I go against the direction that someone wants me to go in, what the consequence of that will be, and then I can mitigate that consequence. So I think it's about having information and doing the best you can, in the circumstances, in the amount of time you have.
Got it. My next question is on how do you measure the success of your role as a head of product, especially in say maybe after 3 months or 6 months in a new organization. How
Mhm.
could you say evaluate yourself, a self-assessment, saying that I have done a good job and these are the things that I was set to do, and I think I've achieved that. How do you self-assess, and Yeah. What are your own metrics for success?
So when I started this job on my first day, my new boss asked me that question. And I said, I want to hear two things from people. I want to hear Micah runs a tight ship, or um, the product organization is buttoned up. That's for me, that's the mark of success. Like once the organization that I'm running is seen as put together, knows what they're doing, we can trust them, we get out of their way, I've been successful. Um, I think that is a little bit tongue in cheek, but I also want people from other departments trying to come work for me too. That's always a good sign that I'm doing something right. Maybe I'm just a good salesperson for product or something. I don't know. But yeah, I really want my team to be respected and to be happy in their work. And I want to create an environment where innovative work can happen and where the team can really thrive and grow and feel good about their work. And I want the work my team does to be directly tied to the success of the company. And I want people to understand how that connects, right? I think about, I mentioned product managers as investors, and I mean, we decide where where the money goes. So ROI is important to track too, and that's a measure of success, or a way to measure success as well. But I know when all those things that I want to create happen, that I've been successful. So I want to have happy employees. You know, happy employees make happy customers. So there's a guy, a restaurateur in New York City called Danny Meyer, who basically reinvented dining in New York many years ago now. He's got famous places like Union Square Cafe. He's founded Shake Shack, and my favorite is Manhattan, which still hasn't reopened from the pandemic. But his whole philosophy is you treat your employees well, and they'll treat your customers well. And sure enough, this is some of the best service in New York City. Like it's incredible. And most of the restaurants he's got are not ridiculously expensive type of experience. They're moderately priced fine dining. It's exceptional service for the price too. So, but anyway, I love the philosophy, and that very much lines up with kind of the way we approach things at Bowery, and it's part of the DNA of Bowery is like recognizing employees, making sure that employees have what they need to be successful and get the feedback they need and all that. And we approach all of that with a firm helping of compassion. And it's kind of amazing the result you get from that. You really, really dedicated, really amazing people. So.
Do you also measure success with the features that you have delivered, delivered in terms of impact and ROI, as you mentioned, like, or is that not a consideration rather than sticking to the timelines, but rather than, even if we have not stuck to timelines, we have been able to say no to the features that did not make sense and delivered on the right ones, and it actually delivered impact? Do you have that as a consideration for you?
Yeah, I do. I usually, I mean, we're measuring things at all sorts of different levels. And in terms of my personal success as a head of product, like I'm not usually looking at the success of an individual feature, but like, yeah, absolutely. We're measuring that too, because we want to know if the investment was worth it or not. Right. So yeah, I mean, we measure usage, of course. We measure. I like to get a lot more specific than usage. I was talking a minute ago about how we looked at that situation where we had certain areas of the product that we knew were correlated with longevity of the user. We really dug into those, and we said, how do we move the people who touch this thing once to being people who touch this thing twice? And we had to really get in there and see what was going on. And then we would make a change, and we would look like how many came over to the next pile, and like we knew that once we got X% of those over, that we were super successful or whatever. And so of course we were tracking to that too. And then so on that level, like we were looking for that kind of success, and in that return on investment, that project was just so wildly incredible. Like it was so cool, and it was just such an amazing case study of like how product management should be done. And I'm not saying that we started out knowing exactly what this started with a design sprint. We were in a design sprint, and we started to do the first day presentations of like just the general context stuff that you like to do at the beginning of those to get the team all on the same page with what we were trying to do. And we started putting up numbers, and we were all like, wait a minute, so if we did this, then we could do this. And then it just all kind of started to happen, right? We figured out on that first day exactly how we were going to measure whether or not that project was successful. So yeah, I mean, I think those things apply to every project you work on. You've got to have metrics that indicate whether or not you're succeeding or not.
Right.
And then it's really important to understand how those fit into the bigger puzzle of the higher level metrics you're trying to reach,
Right.
and then ultimately the company objectives. So yeah, I mean, definitely those things are all super important too.
So, Micah, how do you organize all your work? The reason I ask is, as a PM, which is a cross-functional role, head of product, you must be in any given week. You must be talking to the customers. You must be talking to the sales. You must be talking to marketing. You are talking to your own reports, product managers. Then there are escalations. So there's a lot. It's like a whirlwind sort of a role. How do you organize all your work so that you are not just busy, but you are actually making impact and making progress? So how do you organize? How do you make sense? Because sometimes I get pulled into a lot of things, and then I have to block time on a weekend to see, am I actually making progress, or am I running on a treadmill at the same place? So do you have a dashboard? Do you have, like, I just want to know your self organization.
I think the other hallmark of the way I work is being organized. I was going to make a joke and say, like, very carefully, like I said the other one, but I think my organization approach starts with my calendar, and I'm kind of ruthless with my calendar. It means saying no a lot of the time. And it's kind of a different approach depending on where in my tenure I am in an organization, right? Like right now, being new in this company, I don't have a lot of choice. There's a lot I have to be doing right now to get things set up, to get the machine running, And I was just having this conversation yesterday with some colleagues, like what can we pull off the calendar? And I looked through and I'm like, right now, nothing, And so my strategy for dealing with that right now, when I'm in, 9 hours straight on Zoom every day, is I have to recognize that there is meaning in this suffering. I'm doing this for a reason. Like one of the things I'm doing a lot of right now is that, I'm hiring 6 people at the same time. I have seen so many candidates, my head is going to explode. But I know I need to do that so that I can get out of this pattern. If I don't hire those people, I'm always going to be on that treadmill, right? So I know there's meaning in the suffering right now, and I get through it, right? And it doesn't last forever. And we strategically spend that time on, like I said, I spend my time first on getting the machine running, because once the machine's running, then I can breathe a little bit, and then I can focus on the things I need to focus on, right? So right now I'm hiring. I'm spending a lot of one-on-one time with my team to make sure we're all on the same page with how we communicate about the projects we're working on, how we answer the questions that come up in those presentations, all that kind of stuff. Because it's basically the adage about teaching to fish. Like once they know how to fish, I don't need to be there every day. You know what I mean? Like to help them fish, right? They know how to do it. So anyway, so there's a lot of that happens at the beginning, but then later it becomes a little bit easier because I don't have 100 interviews on my calendar during the week, and I can say I'm going to block a little bit of time, and I'm going to be a little bit more ruthless in my calendaring. The other stuff is, and I think this is maybe more useful to someone who might be listening to this, is I do a lot of diagramming and mind mapping kind of stuff. So especially when I'm new in an organization, I take lots and lots and lots of notes, even in written notes, and then of course here after meetings, I will go process everything I just heard, and I try to draw a picture of it. Like quite literally, most of the time I draw a picture of it, and I'm drawing circles around things and connecting dots and all that kind of stuff. Just so I can understand it. And once I've done that, I've created that artifact. One, in the process of doing so, it's kind of cemented the concepts for me in my brain. But then I also have an artifact I can go back to look at when I need to remember something, right? Because I'm not going to remember all the details. There's too much all the time. So that's the other thing. I also do a lot of writing. So if I have thoughts, I'll just sit down and write it. It's not for anybody but me, but it's just a way to kind of get my thoughts down on paper, and it makes it feel a little less crowded in there, and then I can go back and review what I wrote down if I need to remember something as well. And I keep lots and lots and lots of lists. for various things. They all make sense to me. And as long as it does to me, it's all that matters. One of these lists I started keeping here is the first time I've really done this. I had several big projects that I wanted to tackle, and I was feeling like I was trying to do too much all at the same time, and I wasn't making progress. So I
Right.
just wrote them all down.
Right.
And I kind of wrote a little blurb about where each one was. And I was like, this might be helpful for my boss to see. So I shared it with him. And then I was like, actually, these other two colleagues of mine in design and engineering, they probably wouldn't want to know what I'm up to as well. So I shared it with them too. And I just sent them all a Slack, and I was like, hey, in case you want to know kind of where my head's at in terms of priority at any given point, just check on this thing. I'm going to keep it up to date. And so now they can see it too. I don't share most of the stuff like that I create, but in that case, it just made sense. So it kind of kills two birds with one stone.
Right. So when you say you do a lot of mind mapping, writing, you have to have the privilege of time as well, because as a head of product, you are pulled into these meetings. So do you just protect your time by creating these white spaces on your calendar just to do your own work as well? Because
Sometimes.
I'm guilty. I feel guilty if I'm not able to give time to, say, a marketing team who wants something from me, or from the sales team, or from support. So I just say yes. And as a result, I find very less time to do deep thinking and for processing and stuff like that. So how do you do that? And then I take my weekends to do that, which is like, again, killing me.
Yeah.
So you saying you protect your time by blocking these white spaces on your calendar?
Yeah. I mean, here's what usually happens is Sunday, I sit down at my computer and I put all these blocks in my calendar thinking, oh, I'm going to have all this time to work. And then Monday morning rolls around and the first Slack comes in. Hey, can we talk about this week? And I go, sure. And then I remove one of my blocks and they take it. And
That
then the
happens.
next person comes in and asks me the same thing, and I remove another block. And then by Tuesday afternoon, there's no more block time. But again, I think that's a function of where I'm at right now, and it's not what it's going to be later once I get more of this infrastructure in place so that things can kind of run themselves. I want to have people to send requests to. I want to have a process to inject, things into so that it can just kind of do its own thing. And I don't necessarily have to be involved in everything. And then I can focus on being involved in the things that I do need to. So for right now, a lot of that writing and mind mapping and stuff that happens at night or on the weekend. It's not ideal, and it's not the way it's always going to be. But again, I go back to there is meaning in my suffering right now. So once I get all this locked down, once I've learned everything I need to know, or most of what I need to know, and I understand what I need to know, then and the infrastructure is in place, then a lot of this is going to ease up. And that's the whole point of the way I see the whole point of my job at a startup that's turning the corner, right? I'm coming in to put in systems and processes that can scale as this organization grows. And that means taking some of the burden off of just me or just my team, right? So.
Nice. My last question here we just have 5 more minutes. What is the best way? How do you manage your working relationship when you're reporting to the CEO? Okay, how can you be that best reportee to keep your CEO happy? What has worked for you um, when you work for a CEO? So maybe if you can shed some light on the working relationship.
Absolutely. I think it really, really depends on the CEO. These are human beings, and different people have different needs. They want different levels of detail. You got to get in there and understand what your CEO wants and needs in order to feel comfortable and satisfied that you know what you're doing, and that they have awareness at the level they need. I've worked for CEOs who are way up here and are like, just take care of it. I don't care. I've worked for other CEOs where they wanted to know on the level of detail of the PM on the pod exactly every single story that was going through the pipeline, which is not something that I usually even know, right? I don't find it useful to duplicate the work of my PM. So anyway, but like I've worked in both. My current company has co-CEOs, and both of the CEOs are amazing human beings. I like them
Micah?
more as people every day. And in this case, it's really easy to build a relationship because I actually enjoy their company. Like I actually like being around them and talking to them and that kind of thing. They're also super reasonable. So when you come to them with a good idea, well, I mean, any idea really, they listen and they're open to it. And they give good, thoughtful feedback. So I come back for more. And they make me feel appreciated. So like, it's just like, it's shockingly different than anything I've ever done before. And it's amazing, like to have that kind of thing with them. They're just really, really cool guys. So like, I keep them informed, and I'm probably not doing a good enough job at that. Like I want to do more. I want to keep them more involved. And so that's one of the things that I'm planning to work on here over the next few months, like incorporating them more into our processes. But you know, that isn't how it always is, right? And like I said, I've worked for other folks that were like so down in the weeds and maybe not even nice people. That have been really hard. I had another situation where I had to very, very carefully manage my words and my approach. This particular CEO I reported to was kind of loud and opinionated and didn't mind making people cry. And then he'd fire them for crying. And like, I mean, it was kind of crazy. And that was really rough. The way to manage that one for me for the time that I had to do that, was lots of communication. And I had to get into the weeds because that was the only thing he cared about. So as a result, I didn't have a whole lot of time to do the strategic stuff that I thought was my job, but he wanted me to be in the weeds. And so, you know, if I wanted to make that relationship work, that's what I needed to bring to it. And so that's what I did. Yeah. But I mean, I feel so fortunate right now, and so grateful for the team I'm working on now. It's night and day. And I couldn't say anything. I mean, it's great.
So one of the things I'm always conscious about is taking the demands of my CEO's time, because I'm so aware that he has a ton of things on his plate.
Yeah.
Okay, attention is being asked by a lot of people that report to him. So I don't want to bother him with my questions, but still I have these questions. So I'm always in this dilemma whether to bring a certain topic to him if I'm reporting to him, or not, or which are the areas or questions should I be able to manage by myself, and which are the ones, especially if there is a one-on-one, there are a ton of topics to talk to him. Okay, but then I also want to be very, very careful on my priority topics to talk to him.
Yeah.
So have you found a guideline to keep your communication crisp and high priority so that you don't overwhelm or you don't make more demands than necessary on your CEO's mind?
Yeah, for sure. I think this depends entirely on the CEO too, right? Like the guy that wanted to be involved in everything, like he was like, I want to know everything. Tell me everything every day. Like he wanted me to interrupt him with all this stuff all the time, right? So I was like, okay, that's not what I expected. Especially coming from Autodesk, where we had a very different executive culture, where
Exactly.
executives there were like,
I think Autodesk was a great grounding, isn't it? I think
yeah. I mean, it was great, right? And I'll never forget I felt so stupid. I started my new job right after Autodesk, and I was talking to one of my PMs, and we had a meeting with the CEO, and the PM like had gone into excruciating detail on the slides with all these things that was going on. I was like, just up level it. He doesn't care. He doesn't need to know all the details. He wants to know up here, right? We walk into the meeting. The PM does exactly what I said beautifully. And the CEO is like, where's all the detail? I need details. Like, no, I want to click. Fortunately, the PM knew all those things, so he was able to answer all the questions. But I was like, I just gave this guy terrible advice because I didn't think about who the audience was. And like, if I had considered that and who this person was, I would have had a very different approach, right? So I'm always thinking about like, you know, what they must be going through, right? And in the current situation, I'll never forget, like it was like my first or second week, one of the CEOs at Bowery sat down with me to go through our app from end to end. And basically he ended up spending like 8 hours with me, like 2 hours a day for like 4 different days or something like that. And like the first day we were going to start this 2-hour thing. And I'm like, are you sure you have time for this? Like, I feel terrible. And he said to me, and this is a pivotal moment for me at this company. He said to me, I can't think of anything more important to do with my time right now.
Yeah.
And I kind of wanted to
I
cry
get
almost. Like, I don't even get that from my
that. I
parents.
get that. Yeah.
But like, but like, it was just so great. Like he really wanted to have that time with me, and it is a priority for him to make time for stuff like that, because it is of great concern to him that things are going well, you know, and so he recognizes that if he doesn't make time for these things, for me to tell him what's going on, he's not going to know. So, you know, I'm always very conscious of that, but even more so, I'm conscious about like who the person is on the other end and what they need from me. If they don't want to hear from me, then they won't. You know, if they want to hear from me all the time, then they'll hear from me all the time. You know, I work for them at the end of the day. So,
Right. Exactly. No, that's the reason. Whenever I have a reporting change or a new boss, I my first meeting is to define what the working relationship should be. Does he want details? Does he want status updates weekly? Does he what form of communication does he like? Does he appreciate emails on a weekend? Does he like phone messages? Does he like Slack messages? If he sends an email to me and if I'm not responding within 24 hours, does it mean something? So I have a list of questionnaire and I go through them so that I get to know, instead of learning it the hard way where you screw up something. There was an expectation
right,
mismatch, and I have found this very, very valuable to set. Because sometimes what happens, the new boss or the CEO would never tell you this, so you have to proactively ask, hey, what is your user manual? How can I operate you?
right. Hmm.
So I found this very, very useful.
Absolutely.
Great. Excellent. Micah, this was again a fascinating conversation with you. Just one last thing. I mean,
Yeah.
all your product managers reach out to you when they are in help, when they need help. Where do you reach out when you need help? Because it cannot be that you are this one Superman in the company who has all the answers. Like, where do you get your help? Do you have a community of other product leaders or head of products where you go and talk and resolve your doubts and queries and apprehensions? Do you have a support system like that?
I do. It's very informal, but I do, and it is made up of people I've worked with before, whether they were my managers or people that reported to me. Even, you know, some of the people that I've led have been my best teachers. So, I often reach out to talk about, you know, stuff I'm facing with them. I think at the moment, my biggest source of strength really is my design and engineering partners, Matt and Elle, who run our engineering and design groups, respectively, and they're just fantastic partners, and we really strive to model the kind of relationship that we want our pods to have too with each other, between design, product, and engineering. And they just it ends up being just it's a really helpful relationship. I mean, they're great people, so it's nice just to hang out. But like, also, they actively help me solve problems, and I try to do the same for them where I can. But it's a really great partnership. So I don't have to look very far to find the support that I need. It's
Got it.
often right there in front of me. Also, recently, I've been working with an organization called Upbuild to do some executive coaching stuff, and that has been tremendously helpful too, in a way that I didn't expect. And I really appreciate the time and energy they give me, and then also the insights that they give. It's been really great.
So I am in the process of setting up a mastermind group for head of products from different industries
Yeah.
in a quarterly fashion. So we pick 7 to 8 head of products, and they just meet once or twice, no, not once, but maybe once in 2 weeks or so,
Hmm.
and then they share their concerns and their own struggles and stuff like that. And then it's just like a peer group for getting your troubles,
Hmm.
just sharing and venting it out and getting help from each other. So I'll let you know once that
Yeah,
is
please
in.
do. That sounds really cool.
Excellent, Micah. Thank you so much for your time. Again, it was a fascinating interview. I learned a lot. Usually, I have these interviews out of selfish reasons. I ask my own problems to people that I admire and
That's why you're
get a
good,
lot.
Robbie. That's why you're good, man.
Thanks, Micah. See you around.
All right, take care. Thanks a bunch.
Bye bye.
Bye.